Please note that this podcast episode features themes and depictions of self-harm and suicidal ideation. This episode may be triggering for some listeners and features a content warning. If you or someone you care about needs support, please visit www.blackdog.org.au or www.beyondblue.org.au. If you reside in Australia, you can call the Lifeline helpline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636. For listeners outside of Australia, please visit www.findahelpline.com. G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe, share it around with your mates and give us a rate. That would be great. And you can follow the show on Instagram at thedysregulated.podcast. All right, so this episode will be a little bit different from the last because I have some positivity to share. But to put it all into a bit of perspective, you know, those last two episodes I did, hitting the limit and my empty fuel tank, well, I don't really remember recording them. So I hope they came out okay because I haven't listened to them since. But it's true, I do barely remember recording them. And that is what the last few weeks has been like. Drifting on autopilot and disassociating from reality and not being quite sure what has gone before. For example, I am getting my first pairs of prescription glasses. I got checked last weekend, I think it was, and I only vaguely remember the whole process and would struggle to explain what frames I even paid $600 for. Like, I think I said on one of these hazy last episodes, I sort of remember, my capacity for anything outside of work has dwindled to just about nothing, and it appears my brain's ability to create and form memories outside of my working hours has also suffered, which gives some insights into how destructive these mental illnesses can be. The chief culprit in all of this being the anxiety disorders I have. Generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. But depression has certainly played its role as well, really dulling down our perceptions and ensuring we travel along in a fog that I must say has not lifted for some time. Even BPD, old BPD, gets a mention this week. My very well-managed borderline personality disorder. A key trait of this disorder is this idea of splitting, that everything is either black or white, good or bad, and that there is no room in between for anything else. And it has driven home this idea that only bad things can come from anything we try at the moment, and good luck getting that pendulum to swing back when these disorders are all jockeying for position. The last 3 weeks in particular have been tough, really tough as I can remember, and it has all come from within. No person, no entity, no work expectation or otherwise has caused this massive mental health flare-up. It has all originated from within my psyche, and once the various mental illnesses get a hold of this, then they tend to run with it. And that is exactly what has happened. We have seen cameos from Mr. Imposter Syndrome. The inner child has felt abandoned and restless. The part of me that is sure we are actually a fraud has been making its case, and so much more. We have been in an incredibly heightened state driven by anxiety, and we have just about run out of steam. At one point there, we did run out of steam. No amount of hours spent sleeping has been enough to recover from the war going on within, especially when my dreams acted only as an extension of my waking hours terrors. Dreams about doing a poor job, missing alarm clocks, being fired, all that sort of wonderful stuff. At no moment over the last few weeks has there been the opportunity to rest, take stock, and turn down the mental stress for a bit. I stopped listening to music in the car because I would get frustrated, and it wasn't enough to drown out my sorrow anyway. I haven't eaten properly in about a month and now weigh the same as I did in high school 12 years ago. I am skin and bone. I looked at myself in the mirror before. It was horrifying. My cheekbones are sticking out, as do my ribs. My shoulders are hunched, which is a telltale sign of mental distress, and I'm walking in slow motion, or what they would call in clinical circles psychomotor retardation. There's a lot of that going on at the moment. My voice is gravelly and soft, and I'm in a constant state of freeze as dictated by my anxieties. My depression has kept reminding me that if we don't make this new job work, then everything we have been building towards is gone. And goes with it, Elliot, your whole identity and who you even are as a person. A great thought I'm sure you would agree with. Just wonderful. Now to continue, my blood pressure hit some new records over the last few days. 181 over 123, which puts me in a hypertensive crisis, which requires immediate care from an emergency department because it can lead to a whole stack of bad things, heart attack being one of, which of course I didn't really follow through with because we weren't quite sure whether maybe the idea of cardiovascular disease taking us out may be a good thing. That is how negative my thoughts have been lately. My hands have jittered uncontrollably, my legs twitching, which I might add is a sign of an anxious ADHD sufferer, and it felt like all hope was gone. I was failing at this new job and it was all about to fall apart, just like I said it would on a previous episode when I begrudgingly announced my new role as a behaviour therapist. I should never have done it. I knew this would happen, I kept saying. Well, my OCD kept saying. But then it got worse. So the last couple of weeks have been pretty bad, but the last 2 days have been nothing short of traumatic. So 2 days ago was State of Origin night here in Australia, New South Wales versus Queensland in the third and deciding game. The pinnacle of rugby league in this country and Australia's greatest sporting rivalry. For those who remember, I'm a huge Newcastle Knights supporter in the rugby league, Newcastle of course being in New South Wales, but State of Origin is a different beast. So while watching the big decider, which unfortunately Queensland won, all I could think about was how anxious I was and how petrified I was to front up to work again the next day. My eyes were on the game, but my mind was elsewhere. I sat on the lounge with my family, all hunched over, hands crossed in a defensive position. My eyes were glazed over. I wasn't really focusing on anything. I was expecting some catastrophic incident to take place at any moment. Now, my family tried to calm me down, but they couldn't, and I couldn't either. The legs were shaking, the hands were trembling, the mind was in overdrive. I was crumbling right before their eyes. I then tried to sleep after the game. Without doing so, due to how petrified I was and how convinced I was that my inability, imposter-like disposition and fraudulent behaviour was surely to unravel, and my new employer would find out how totally hopeless I was and that I would be fired on the spot, and rightly so. Now, let's not forget that I hadn't received nothing but praise and positivity from my co-workers on how I had been performing up until this point. But that didn't matter because I hadn't nailed the ability to write behaviour support plans yet or functional behavioural assessments. Remembering I've been in this job less than a month still. I was mediocre at best, which meant my clients that rely on me to formulate a plan to improve their lives would suffer because of my incompetence. This is what I was thinking. That there was this guilt that was difficult to carry. After Origin and a sleepless night, I knew when I woke up that this had gone from an already bad level to an even worse one. I was scared to get out of bed. When my alarm went off, I cried. I did. Manly tears. I cried. Everything was crumbling all around me. And that alarm signified the beginnings of the end. Then it felt like my world, as I said, was literally crumbling down around me, as was, though, the identity I'd built up for so long. The job was surely gone, and with it was the very fundamentals of who I am. And with such a bleak outlook for the rest of my life now secured, I was a total mess. Total shutdown of movement, incoherent thinking. Logical thinking was well gone by this stage, and the anxiety and depressive thoughts were like nothing I had ever felt before. These 2 days, I can say now with clarity, were the worst 2 days I've ever faced. Big call, I know, but they were definitely the worst 2 days I've ever faced in 31 and a half years of living. And there's been a few doozies, that's for sure. These mental disorders had an absolute field day with me for weeks leading up, but this was their big crescendo, and they wanted to bury me for good. Now, before I have had suicidal ideation, that has come and gone quite regularly. Now, usually there's never anything to worry about so much because there's usually not much significance behind these thoughts, except on the odd occasion. But even then, the thinking behind it was still a bit flimsy. But not this time. I was imagining how I would end it all, the methods, the timing of it all of it. The plan was coming to fruition. I was looking for the way out because this reality I was in, there was too much complexity, there was too much pressure, there was no other way out of this. I had nothing left to live for if my dream was over. And this truly, at my core, scared the absolute shit out of me. Even when I'd been in a psych ward previously, this paled in comparison to this. I was convinced this was Elliot done. Game over. We tried hard, and you know what? Maybe this podcast would provide some sort of legacy, but we were done. This was it. It was decided that I should stay home from work that day to try and get some straight thinking back into me, but it didn't really work. I did have a last-ditch attempt to contact my GP, who thankfully squeezed me in at the last minute. He's a great doctor. He's always looked after me, and I would be in a much worse place. I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for him. We had a great chat, and I was prescribed a low dose of a benzodiazepine called lorazepam, of which I've had experience with before, to try and ride out this acute pain I was feeling until my logical brain could find some space to operate within again, because it had been totally shut out for weeks. Then today, I was faced with the biggest challenge of my professional career, possibly in general. So after having the previous day off, where the whole day off I was just ruminating and catastrophizing about how I'd blown another great opportunity, how I've let the team down, I've let the clients down, everyone's going to hate me, all that sort of stuff. The next day I knew I had the front up to work and try and save my job, because if I didn't go in today, it was over. Whether they were the ones to tell me it was over didn't matter, because I knew within myself after that there would be no going back. So I woke up this morning again petrified after having dreams of everything going wrong. Again, there's just no escape from this stuff sometimes. And I remember I put my uniform on so slowly and I hobbled to the car, and it's winter here in Australia. One of my diagnoses is seasonal affective disorder. I reckon that's playing a role at the moment as well, because funnily enough, the weather's been pretty bad the last couple of weeks, and so has my mood. There could be a bit of a correlation there, maybe even causation. Anyway, I proceed. So I get to the car park. I sit in the car for a bit and try and get my thoughts running, at least in some sort of direction together, and trying to come up with what I'm going to say, what apologising I'm going to say to the team. So I walked into the office feeling like a dead man and immediately started apologising for letting the team down, putting extra work on them unnecessarily, not being reliable, which is something I have always strived for. Since my first job, I've always tried to be Mr. Reliable, they used to call me at one of the other jobs. But unfortunately, at the start of this one, I've been anything but. And failing my clients was also the other topic I was bringing up, who are depending on me to come up with interventions to improve their quality of lives. Now, the response I got from my fellow team members was nothing short of amazing, and thank goodness for this. And I quote, "Why are you apologising for? If you're sick, then we want you to look after yourself. This is a hard job to walk straight into, and you are doing great. Why are you so worried? You didn't add work for us. It took 3 quick phone calls and it was all sorted. Easy. And then, we love having you on our team and what you bring to the business. We back you all the way, so please stop apologising," because I must say I did interject often and continued my apologetic sort of stream and way of thinking. So they got a bit jack of that by the end of it, because the point was quite clear that they believed I had nothing to apologise for. And even the boss told me some of his own battles with mental illness, highlighting the fact that it can happen to anyone, and in our business of psychological and behavioural therapy, that it is never a problem if mental health starts to get in the way, but only if you don't tell us, as we can help. It's what we do. I tentatively asked about my report writing, which has been playing on my mind so much lately, and was told, considering how soon I've started, that my reports are actually really good, and that the feedback from the clients when I go out and see them has been nothing short of amazingly positive. I thanked them for not firing me, to which they laughed at how far from the truth that comment really is. And I really needed to hear all of that. I needed that evidence, that external evidence, to really push back against what was going inside my mind. And it did a great job, that's for sure. And you know what? After all that, I put in a full day's work. I worked hard and showed to myself that we can do this. But what we really need to do is work on stopping for good this negative self-talk, this self-defeatist attitude, this unrestrained anxiety, and the ease in which such a small trigger can cause an almighty spiral downwards, right to a place where I question who I even am and why I shall continue to exist. So the good news out of this, besides the fact that my job is secure, is that I am actually better than half decent at my role, that my team is so understanding and accommodating, and that in the face of multiple mental illnesses trying to drag me down, that after a few missteps, I was able to once again drive them back into their holes, even if just for now. And that is a huge win considering some of the thoughts we were thinking not that long ago. And the more that happens, or the more that this happens, pushing them back into their holes, the better we get at facing them in the future. And the more losses that they have, then the less enthusiasm they tend to show when trying to crash and burn our worlds. Make no question, they almost got me this time, big time. There was a very strong argument that I should have gone back to the psych ward and probably for a much longer stay. And if it wasn't for the fact that this was a new job and that I need money, I probably would have picked that option. But we didn't do that, and we've come out with a great result, but we got to keep this going, and there'll be a little bit more about that shortly. So the last few weeks, but in particular, the last 2 days were the worst I've ever experienced, even worse than the trips up to the hospital and the time I was admitted onto the psychiatric ward previously. Make no mistake, this was a lot worse. Much worse. But here we are, still punching, still in this fight. They had me on the ropes, these mental illnesses, but I've battled out of the corner and we stand toe to toe again. And I am willing the disorders on. Bring it on. You haven't beaten me yet. I've got more fight left in me. Let's go. Because they now look as though they are tiring, which is good. Elliot planted a few left and right hooks on their collective chins, and they didn't like that one bit, let me tell you that right now. So now it's time to keep up the pressure. And to do just that, I have had already a GP appointment with another one booked in for next week. The week after, I have another psychiatric appointment where I'll be asking a couple of questions about what the next steps are because, as I've said on previous episodes, I've been on now 18 psychoactive medications, and you could say that we are in a worse place now than we've ever been. So they've obviously done nothing. So what's the next steps? If you want to know what the next steps are, listen to my episode on treatment-resistant disorders. I explained those next steps all there when medications aren't doing the job. But even before that, tomorrow on Saturday, I'm seeing my psychologist for the first time in a long while, which is really, really good. So to keep these mental illnesses in their corners and hopefully have them sprawled on the mat, on the canvas, knocked out, it takes more than one good day of fighting. But with some allies back in my corner, I'm hopeful that this will prove to be the circuit breaker I really needed. Because I tell you what, make no mistake, we really got close to some really bad places there. And as I said before, a bit earlier in this episode, it scared the shit out of me that my mind was coming up with some of the things that it was. And we really need to use that as evidence that we need to get back on parity here with this fight to begin with, but also that we can go to those levels, make no mistake. We've been there before, but this time just had more significance behind it in a big way, and we do not want to go back there again. So there you go. The absolute week from hell finishes on a high note. Who would have thought it? Certainly not me this time yesterday, that's for sure. But it goes to show for people like you and me who are battling and fighting these illnesses, we just have to keep fighting. We've just got to keep standing there, taking the punches, but also throwing a few ourselves. But also in a way that is smart and can give you a boost in this battle. And that's where doctors, psychologists and psychiatrists come into the picture. You are just one man or woman. And when you are fighting even just one mental illness, let alone say 8 like I am, but it doesn't matter. It's about the intensity of the illness. That is really what the key determinant is. You need an army to rally around you. And that army can also consist of friends, families, and trusting co-workers, you name it, whatever it is, bring them into the fold. But build that army, then launch everything you've got at these enemies, because they can be beaten. They definitely can be beaten. It may take time, as I'm living proof of that. I am still well and truly in the throes of this battle. But with each battle won, our confidence grows, and so does our strength. And eventually, we wonder how they ever had a grip on us like they did. And it becomes child's play. Oh, there's a little depressive thought, you just flick it away because we've beaten it down to such a level that you can just flick it away and laugh at it and just disregard it completely. And I tell you what, I can't wait until I get to that point, because it will be amazing. It'll be one of those, standing on top of a mountain, just yelling, yes, we made it, we did it. And I tell you, if you keep listening to this show, although lately my mood has dipped quite a bit, that's true, we are, like I said, in this fight, and we have now got some allies back on our side, and we're ready to go to attack this thing with everything we've got. So keep following the journey, because I tell you, I want to take us all to the top of the mountain with me. So anyway, this is the Dysregulated podcast. Thank you for listening. I do appreciate it. I really, really do. I do. If you want to follow the show on Instagram, you can at the dysregulated.podcast, and feel free to send out a message for a topic you might want covered on the show, or perhaps any specific disorders that we could do a real dive deep into. That would be great. That would be great, because I want to really have a good look at some of these disorders that I talk about on the show quite frequently, and really pull them apart and see what they're all about. So again, I hope that this episode offered some real first-hand insight into what some of these battles are like. But remember, as bad as it got, and I'll tell you what, yesterday was as bad as it gets as far as I'm concerned. But let's not forget, we came out on top. Yes, we did. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to your company on the next episode of the Dysregulated podcast.